Today we're going to talk about Workbook 4A, Exercise 14. In the textbook, it's pages 36 through 38. We're still doing multiplication, but now we're going to talk about multiplying by a two-digit number instead of a one-digit number. So now it's 32 times 20 is our first example. Well, we are showing in several different ways, and if you look at the pictures in the book, you see that 32 times 20, if you think of that as 32 times 10, which is 320, times 2, that'll give you 640. Or if you do it the other way around, 32 times 2 is 64. 64 tens is 640. And what you begin to realize is that you can break this down into a two-step problem. Because 2 times 10 is 20, but it's easier to do 32 times 2 and then 32 times 10. But another thing is interesting. If you're just multiplying by 10, like in these examples on the top of page 37, 16 times 10, that's 16 tens. 40 times 10 is 40 tens. 254 times 10 is 254 tens. Remember how we've talked about that for a long time. When you have tens, you can count them just like that. That's 254 tens. And it continues on in the next part of it. 29 tens is 290. 96 tens is 960. 380 tens is 380 tens, 3,800. So we just continue thinking about place value. All right, let's go on to a few more examples. If you find the product of 14 and 30, we now have a few different ways to do it. Let's talk about all the different ways because it's important to know more than one way to do a problem. 14 times 30 is the same thing as 14 times 10 times 3. That gives you 140 times 3. 140 times 3, well, that's 300 and 120 or 420. You could go write that vertically. You could think about it being 300s and 340s. Either of those works. Method 2, 14 times 30. We could do it the other way around. We could call it 14 times 3 and then times 10. Now, this is probably the easier way to do it because we know that 14 times 3, that's 30 and 12, that's 42. And multiplying it by 10, 42 times 10, that's 42 tens. It's kind of the same thing as saying 14 times 30 is 14 times 3, and then thinking of it as 14 times 30 is the same thing with making it a 10. Sometimes my 4s look like 9s. I have to make sure you remember that's a 14. If 14 times 3 is 42, 14 times 30 is 420. And so it's important to be able to see and think through those kinds of problems. Now we'll do some practice on that. 284 times 20. Which method would you like to use? We could think of 284 times 2. Quite a few numbers, right? Let's start out with that being a vertical problem. And here's the point we want to make. When we multiply by 20, it's going to give us that many tens at the end. So 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 8 is 16. 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5. Because you see 284 times 2 is 568 times 10. That 10 will always, when I'm multiplying by 10, I always have a 0 at the end. 568 times 10 is 568 tens. So do you see that we can kind of ignore the 0 and we can write it like a vertical problem, multiplication problem, and we can realize it's going to end in a 0. It's really 4 times 309, but there will be a 0 in the ones place. And when I multiply the 40 times 9, that 36 is really 6 tens and 3 hundreds. And the 40 times 0 is 0, plus 3 more is a hundreds number. 40 times 300 is 1200 tens. And so 12,360 is the answer. Again, please notice 309 times 4 is 1,236. So 309 times 40 is 1,236 tens. So we write it that way. Then they give us some more to practice. Some of these you might can do without writing it out. Some of them you'll have to write out. 23 times 30. 23 times 3 is 69, and it's that many tens. So 23 times 30 is 690. 68 times 70. I'm going to write that out this way. I know when I multiply by 7 tens that I'll have a tens number, and so my ones digit will be 0. 7 times 8 is 56. 7 times 6 is 42. Add 5 is 47. So it's 476 tens, or 4,760. See how easy it is when you multiply to think about the number of tens. 392 times 80. I'm going to have a 0 in the ones place. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 9 is 72, plus 1 is 73. 24 and 7 is 31. So 31,360, or 3,136 tens. 50 times 36. Again, the 0 at the end just tells me I'm going to have a 0 in the ones place, and this is 5 tens times 36. Well, 5 times 36 gives me 30 for the tens place. 15 and 3 is 18. So again, 36 times 5 is 180. So 36 times 5 tens is 180 tens, or 1,800. 45 times 90. There's a 0 in the ones place. 9 times 5 is 45. 9 times 4 is 36. Add 4 to get 40. 4,050 is the answer. This is an interesting one. I have 560 times 60. I have 560 times 6 tens, so I'll have a tens answer. So there'll be a 0 in the ones place. 6 times 0 is 0. 6 times 6 is 36. 6 times 5 is 30, plus 3 is 33. So 33,600 is the answer to that multiplication problem. Okay, we're doing bigger problems, a little bit harder problems, making sure that we are all able to handle multiplying by tens, thinking about it that way, not just following steps to get an answer, but thinking about what it means to multiply something by a factor of 10. All right, so now you can do exercise 14.